Hello and welcome to this fairly unscripted video. Today I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on the recent news regarding Doctor Who Series 13, based on what we've learnt from the brief teaser trailer and Comic-Con panel we got yesterday. Look at me talking about something up-to-date and mainstream. Oh, by the way, the most recent episode of my retrospective on a 20-year-old TV show is available now, link to it in the description. But before we get into the video, if you haven't already, please support the channel by hitting the subscribe button and liking and commenting the video. If we manage to get up to 400 subscribers, I will release my worst to best of the Classic Doctors video. You can also find and follow me on Twitter at the links above here. So we didn't get too much about the upcoming series. It's in keeping with Chibnall's tradition of being fairly secretive, which is not too much of a bad thing, especially given how many things have been leaked from this season. So we've got to leave something to the imagination. The two main details we learnt was that not only is the series going to be more of a serialized 8-part story rather than individual episodes, but we seem to be getting a third companion, that being Vinder, played by Jacob Anderson. I'm kind of intrigued about where they're going to take this character, because I get the feeling he's probably going to be introduced later in the series. We're going to start off with Dan, played by John Bishop, being introduced in the first episode, and then I imagine this character will show up later on. I am sort of kind of disappointed that he's not an official companion, because from the looks of his sort of costume, that he was going to be from the future, I guess, and it would have been a nice shake-up to have a companion who isn't from the present day. I'm not really sure what sort of role he's going to have, so if he's in enough episodes, he could be sort of like a companion in all but name. We'll have to wait and see. It's far too early days. In regards to the narrative shake-up, I'm really excited for this format change. Something that Chibnall's era has struggled with, and to a lesser extent Moffat's before him, was having to deal with pacing. A lot of the time, their stories, while there are a lot of really good ideas, they don't fit into the 45-50 minute format, and certain episodes have felt kind of rushed or underdeveloped because they didn't have enough time to really get anything going, I suppose. Like particular episodes I think of as like the Ghost Monument. I see that working as, say, a Classic Who style 6-part story with a larger cast to sort of sell the threat of the planet, and a long running time to give them a chance to develop, give them time to grow and us get invested in them. And like in contrast, you've got an episode like Can You Hear Me, which probably could have worked in the format if a lot of the elements were removed. Like, we didn't need the subplot in Calippo. I don't think Ryan's friend really needed to be there. I think it should have just focused on Yaz and Ryan's story. There are a few exceptions to this, of course, like Haunting of the Villa Diodati and Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. I think they fit fairly well into the 45-50 minute format, but for the most part, it's something that Chibnall has really struggled with, and this sort of shake-up, which allows him to tell a story in the best possible way, allowing complete time to let things develop, instead of having to write 8 individual stories, which might not necessarily be bad, but wouldn't have full potential unless they had a longer running time. Though this will depend on what the actual story of the season is. From the looks of it, it's going on a similar route to, say, The Key to Time or Trial of a Time Lord. That being, each story is set in a different location, but there's going to be a continuous story. And according to Chibnall, each episode is going to lead into each other, and there's going to be a cliffhanger at the end of all of them. From what we know so far, minus spoilers for the series, is that we're going to start off in the present day where the Doctor and Yaz meet Dan, and that story is going to involve the Sontarans, and then it'll lead into the second episode, which is set in the Crimean War, and the Sontarans are also going to be in that one. And then from there, it's probably going to be a sort of like fetch quest type story, where they go from location to location to track something down. I'm not too sure. The teaser trailer didn't give us too much to work off. I wasn't really too surprised at that. I think the closer we get to the release date, the more information we'll get to see. I was surprised that we didn't get at least one shot of one of the returning villains that have been spoiled because of the leaks. I suppose it was just a choice for Chibnall to just focus on our 3 or potentially 4 lead characters, which is for the most part all we got. That was kind of what I was expecting, but I was hoping for at least one monster, but it's not too bad since it is just a teaser. I'm hoping that this series gives the 13th Doctor and Yaz more time in the spotlight now that Graham is gone. I think he definitely stole the show in the previous 2 seasons. I'm guessing that Dan is very much going to fill the role that Graham had, but to a lesser extent. Yaz is sort of like the more experienced companion, and she'll be the one to sort of show him the ropes and support him. On the subject of the 13th Doctor, I think there's been a lot of talk recently about Jodie Whittaker leaving and who potentially could be replacing her. However, since there has been no official confirmation on whether or not Jodie is actually leaving the show, I'm really hoping that this isn't her last season, especially since we're going for this more experimental route. I hope that this is sort of like a brief period in her tenure, which sort of like gives them a chance to do things a little bit differently, see what works and see what doesn't compared to what they've been doing up to this point, and then take that into consideration for a 4th and potentially 5th season. I don't think she necessarily needs to leave after 3 years. I know it's a sort of common rule for Doctors to leave after 3 years, but I don't think her characters necessarily become stale. I think there's definitely more that they could do with the 13th Doctor, and I don't really want her to leave just for the sake of it. I mean, if Jodie does want to leave, then she's more than welcome to. She has every right to. I just hope that the 13th Doctor has a few more years left in her, especially given that the 60th anniversary is coming up. I don't know if they'll do anything huge for it, but if there is some kind of special episode, I do hope she is involved, because it's not that long away, and it'll be a shame for her to miss out. I've heard a rumour that they're going to just be doing sort of like 2 specials next year, and honestly, if that means that Jodie can stay for a bit longer, then they might as well just have those 2 episodes next year, and then have Series 14 be her final one in 2023. We'll have to wait and see. That's a little while away off, so we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I think I'll wrap this up by briefly talking about my feelings on the Timeless Child arc and where I want it to go. In terms of the concept of Time Lords taking the ability to regenerate from another species, I completely buy that. I mean, going off stuff like Zagreus, yeah, it seems like something they do. Having it be the Doctor is the main part that I'm not really a huge fan of. I'm not too annoyed by it, because I imagine, much like the hybrid and the Doctor being half human, it's going to be something that's going to be forgotten and retconned, not necessarily by Chibnall, but at some point it'll just be forgotten. In terms of whether or not I want to see it in Series 13, I think it might be best to just drop it and focus on this story that they are going to be telling, unless the whole plan is to focus on the Timeless Child. And if that's the case, I'm not really interested in it. Even if I liked that idea, there's not really much more that we need to know about it. I mean, given that it's basically a prequel story, We know what's going to happen, that at some point Rassilon's going to pull an animal farm and kill Tecteun and rewrite Gallifreyan history in his image. The Doctor's going to fall into the loons, or whatever this era's equivalent of, and Timber being the sort of timeless child. And I'm not really interested in this sort of gimmick that we can have sort of like big name actors play the Doctor for an episode. I'd rather focus on the 13th Doctor, given that up until this point she's sort of been lost in certain episodes because of the crowded TARDIS, and just being like, oh look, we've got Lily James playing the Doctor for this episode. Oh, it's just a bit of it's an interesting gimmick, but the focus should be on 13, especially if she's going to be leaving. If she's got a couple more seasons left, then maybe you could spend more time on it, but if not, I'm not really fussed about learning more about the Timeless Child. Might be best to, if Chibnall has anything more he wants to talk about this arc, I recommend he probably just sort of save it all for the Target novel and just sort of like fully explore it there in full detail. That's probably the best approach for it, because from what I've seen, even the people who sort of like it are not too interested in it. And given the sort of negative reputation it's received, I don't know if he'll necessarily continue it. From how he left it off in the actual episode, potentially he could never reference it again. Now in regards to Jo Martin coming back, I definitely hope we see her again in the show at some point. While she'll definitely get a bunch of Big Finish box sets in the future, I hope she appears in the show a couple of times before then, so we can get to know her version of the Doctor a bit better. You don't necessarily even need to bring the arc up in those episodes, you can just have them be sort of casual multi-Doctor stories, like the Two Doctors, where the two clash on their different types of personalities. Well, that's all for now. If you'd like me to discuss more of these news regarding Series 13 as it begins to come out, let me know and I'll try and keep up to date for you. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Series 13's news so far, whether you think it's going to be a stronger season than the ones we've had before with the 13th Doctor, or if you're worried that it's just going to be more of the same. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.